Welcome to this episode from New South Wales Family Day Care Association's PD in Your Pocket program, made possible with funding from the New South Wales Government's Department of Education. The topic for this month is Using the Approved Learning Frameworks, version 2.0. This is a recording of the webinar presentation on the 28th of May, 2024, and was presented by Dr Red Ruby Scarlet. This webinar also includes the expert interview with Val from Val's Family Daycare.
Good evening, everybody. Dr Red Ruby Scarlet here, and I am so excited to be with you this evening to be talking about using the approved learning frameworks V2 in family daycare. So let's just start in a really important way by acknowledging country. This beautiful, beautiful artwork by the fabulous Gary Purchase. And so we just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on the country that we meet. I'm here on beautiful Gadigal country. I'm sure you are all around the country. In fact, I know that you are. So I'm very excited to hear, maybe in the chat you could just put where you are, because sometimes there's something really special about knowing the place of country that you're on. And we are on many different lands, and I just want to really, I guess, embody the spirit of what learning with country means and think about how where we are makes a difference to the kind of learning. And one of the things that I really love about both the new ALFs is the approved learning frameworks is that there is a very strong focus on place and a very strong focus on really helping us understand belonging in new ways. And so I think that's an important part of continuing our acknowledgement of country through our everyday work. So here we go. I don't know whether you got your PD in a Pocket booklet. I think for people who registered, you may have been sent a link. And I think that if you didn't, it will be put in the PD in Your Pocket Facebook group. There should be a link there to download it. I was a little bit excited. So I printed it out because I thought I wanted to actually have it as a resource, because as I was going through and creating this and thinking about what was important, it was really nice for me to revisit, because even though I put things together, there was stuff in there that I'd forgotten. And it's such a great reminder to have a resource like this. And for those of you who actually do have either the PDF or a printout in front of you, it might be worthwhile having it near you as we go through the webinar this evening, because a lot of the content that you're going to see on the screen is very well supported within this book. So I don't want you to think, oh, I watched the webinar, but now I've got to go to the book, and is the information different? Because I know that sometimes that can be really confusing. And I guess, you know, some of the most important things for me are that my colleagues feel fantastic about who they are, you feel really strong about your knowledge, and you know where to find it. And then it's easy to find when you've got a lot of things to do, especially when you're in family daycare. It's different when you have many people in a team in a centre streamlining. I think family daycare people are probably some of the best organised educators I've come across. So have a look for that. There's also a link for a survey, which I've got some very interesting information that Family Daycare New South Wales has collected, and I'm going to share that with you. And if you can find those links to the surveys, please fill them out, because it will be fantastic to have a full picture if you haven't already. And of course, at the end, there'll be a survey as well. And then you will have a certificate of participation. I've just got a little note here to say, check your junk mail. Sometimes, unfortunately, important things like those participation certificates of participation documents, etc., do sometimes pop into our junk. So just be sure to check there that you've received it. So on we go. Now, what did we learn from you? We sent out some questions prior to this session, and as I said, we are overwhelmed with the amount of people who are joining us, which is very exciting. And so here are some of the results that we learned from you. I've got two pieces of technology going here. So the first question was, how familiar are you with the approved learning frameworks, the EYLF or My Time, Our Place? And so this is what your results were, which I thought was fantastic. So 53% of you are somewhat familiar with the approved learning frameworks. 39% of you are very familiar with the approved learning frameworks. 8 of you are not fantastically or familiarly, and I think it was only 0.28 were not familiar at all. And I have to say, I think that's pretty impressive. The wonderful thing is that not only has the New South Wales Education Department put this webinar on for you, and of course, Family Daycare New South Wales, but you've now got a resource, you've now got this to come back to, but please remember that the biggest resource that you ever have in your community is each other. So the fact that you look at that data and go, well, there's a lot of people who feel really confident, you know you've got a lot of people you can call on to help you subsequently. So what was the next question? Let's have a peek. Have you been to any recent professional learning about the new learning frameworks version 2? Let's see what the results were from that. So 48% of you have currently been to some professional learning. 35% haven't. So hello, and I hope I deliver this beautifully and well for you. I hope it's a good first time. And even if it's a second or third time, I hope it's also useful for you and it makes you feel good about yourself. And 17% of you were unsure. So let's have a look at the next. Have you discussed any of the key changes in the new approved learning frameworks V2 with any of your colleagues? So this was a yes, no. A huge 63% of you said, yes, we have. So I think that kind of just made my last point about you are your best resources, especially because you know, not only do you know your own profession or part of the profession best, but you also know, you know it in these times, because we could say, oh, well, I did family daycare 10 years ago, and that would have been magnificent then, but it has changed 10 years later or 20 years later. So you know what the experience is like right now. And I think that's why it's really good to feel very confident that you are your own best resources, in amongst other things, of course. And then 37% of you said no, but just being here tonight, you're already starting to participate and already starting to discuss. So we could probably almost turn that circle into a big fat 100. I'm so good at data. Okay. So the next question that we asked you was, how confident are you in using the approved learning frameworks to support your practice? And so once again, this was very reassuring data, that 22% of you were very confident. And normally, you know, there is a little bit of a tendency in early childhood. We think, oh, I'm not quite sure, or we worry a little bit or feel a bit awkward about it. And to have 22% people go, yep, feel confident, very confident, that's actually terrific. 62% somewhat confident, which I think is almost just as close. So that is absolutely terrific. I think that says something about the way in which the EYLF has been able to talk to us, but also, I don't know about you, but I think the two new updates of My Time, Our Place and the EYLF, I really, really love them. I loved the first two, but I really, really love these updates. So it looks like that's happening for you as well. Then we've got 15% who weren't very confident, and a very skinny, you have to squint to see that, 1% who aren't very confident at all. Well, what I can say to that 1% of people is there are 99% other people who have got different levels of confidence. They're your people, they're around you, they're here with us tonight. They'll be watching, you'll be able to watch again and share with them. And I anticipate many, many more conversations as we go along. So let's dive into it. This is what we're covering tonight. We're going to have a look at using the approved learning frameworks in family daycare. So what's new and how to use it? Excuse me. The second is the approved learning frameworks and the national quality standard. Very important to look at the relationship, because there have been all sorts of little tiny updates here and there. And I know that Family Daycare New South Wales have been very, very good at updating you with all those details. So we now just want to show how all of that kind of fits together as a puzzle. So just like making sure that the content of the booklet that goes with the webinar is quite streamlined to the webinar we're having this evening, so too is the work that we're doing to dovetail the approved learning frameworks and the National Quality Standard. Then these are my favourite bits. So I've had a lot of people ask me about what do we do with the new EYLF and how do we do it and what's your approach? My favourite thing is to turn everything into a question. So the third thing we're going to do is looking at the power of questioning to support the use of the approved learning frameworks V2, and then looking at unpacking the approved learning frameworks, the outcomes. This is probably my favourite bit. I don't quite turn the outcomes into questions. What I do is I turn them into incomes. Now, I know that sounds a little bit mathsy, and for those of you who know me, I'm probably more arty than mathsy, but I was just trying to think of a way to help people along instead of just going, well, here's that outcome, or because that child wrote this, that was that outcome, something a little bit more meaningful, something a little bit deeper, and something that I know that the architects of the National Quality Standard and the National and the approved learning frameworks. Of course, I was involved in the development of the first two, so I know them very well and gave lots of feedback on the second one. So I get very excited about trying to find ways to communicate the really beautiful and special and important information that's there. So in amongst that, there's going to be a few things like ways of doing things, brainstorming, charting, mapping, webbing. Now, some of those words might be familiar to you, some of them might be different, but we've got a few little examples. And then I'm going to use this idea of what they call, if you remember that old game of string, it's called cat's cradle, where you kind of make these things out of string and you can do them with each other. And in fact, you need each other to do them to kind of get these shapes. So putting it all together in that lovely stringy, squiggly way, because sometimes that's how it can feel. And then questioning some elements, turning the biggest question of them all into the planning cycle, and of course, the outcomes into incomes. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I hope you're getting excited. So here are the two new approved learning frameworks, and it's 2024, so we now have an obligation to have these learning frameworks in action. And I think the best way to do that is, of course, to be doing that together. That's the most important thing of all. These frameworks are obviously, some of your services might just be birth to 5 or 6. Some of your services might be birth and you to up to 12, because you might have school children, in which case you're using both of them. So obviously there's quite a lot of similarities between them, but it's quite important if you are working with children across that age range of birth to 12, that there is that visibility of both of the learning frameworks, because there are some things that are probably significantly different. And I think mostly it's around play and leisure in My Time, Our Place, though that is strong in the EYLF as well, but there are some slightly different pieces there and just ways of engaging. And you would know that because you're working with children of all those ages. So let's dive in and have a little peekaboo at the approved learning frameworks. I've jumped ahead in my slides. Here we go. Here are where the approved frameworks sit in the National Quality Standard. So the great thing is it's quite easy to find because it's number 1. And how wonderful that when we did get a beautiful national quality system, that the very first thing was educational program and practice. So there you see 1.1.1, the 3 ones. In 1.1 is the approved learning frameworks, curriculum decision-making. The educational program enhances each child's learning and development. So when you're thinking about how am I going to enhance each child's learning and development, obviously you have lots of knowledge and experience, but we also have these, I think of them as absolute treasure chests of bits and pieces that help us actually go, well, how am I actually going to do that? What will the curriculum decisions be? How will it be child-centred? What will the programming learning opportunities be, etc., as you go down through the National Quality Framework, but particularly in Quality Area 1. So just have a little peekaboo at that and think about the relationships between the two frameworks, and that it's always there with Quality Area 1. And what some people do is they might even take this and actually stick that bit somewhere in the EYLF or My Time Our Place, in order that it's a reminder that this is the primary piece. Although it does link to many other parts of the National Quality Standard, this is the primary piece where they connect. So we love that. So what's new across the frameworks? What I've done for you here is I've bolded some language. So important words, like when I read that out, clarifications and expanded explanations across elements of the original frameworks. Okay, what does that mean? How do I think about taking it in? So when I read that sentence and I choose the words that are going to help me think, well, what have they done? What are the doing words? Clarifying something is a doing word. Expanded explanation. So that means that there were explanations in there, and now those explanations have been expanded, or there's more detail, or they've simplified them, or there might be some dot points to go with them. And so bolding those words helps us understand, okay, what's new and what do we kind of need to do with it? And so once you know where to put your focus, it'll help you figure out where to start to engage with the documents. And I think, you know, obviously critical reflection that's our driving engine, and we'll talk a bit about that later on this evening. Our driving engine will be around, how we clarify, how we expand explanations, what we do with the addition of 3 new principles. So one of them is sustainability. It's there in it's all this beautiful boldness, and it's there with 3 really clear parts about economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And so how do we clarify that? How do we work with that expanded explanation of sustainability? So this is where the what's new part helps us think about what we do with the new bits that have been given to us. And then there are some updated practices that go with that, things like cultural responsiveness. So we'll be diving into that. There's a much stronger connection. What do we mean by stronger connection? Does that mean it means to be more visible in our practice, more visible in our program, more visible in our conversations, in our newsletters, in our relationships? And therefore, there's a stronger connection in our thinking to the documents that are in front of us, the magnificent children, families, and communities and environments, wherever they are, that encompass the work that we're doing. So what does that look like? What's the stronger connection between all of the ideas, those in the frameworks and those in the National Quality Standard? So transitions, I mentioned sustainability, theoretical approaches. I don't want anybody to be frightened of that. I'm going to talk a lot about page 13 and make it your best friend on earth. Critical reflection we talked about, and probably the most magnificent, strong visibility is the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of being, knowing, and doing, and inclusion. Now, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives and the recognition of them has been in the National Quality Standard for a long time. So it's not that it hasn't been there. It's just now been made explicitly visible in a really magnificent way in 3 particular places that we talk about in the EYLF and My Time, Our Place. And so to see that and think, I've actually now got this wonderful, an educator said to me today, it's open slather now. I can just make sure that I'm bringing those perspectives forward in every single thing that I'm doing. And just to see that wonderful enthusiasm for a non-Indigenous educator was really heartening. And I love that the power of these beautiful documents that we have as our, you know, these are our children. We're growing up a country with these documents. To see the enthusiasm that educators have and what they're bringing out of them into reality, to the lived reality of the education of children and the leisure of children is just extraordinary. There's just so many positive examples. And so I guess those words, think about those words. When you read it, other words might jump out at you. Make sure you highlight things that are significant to you, because it has to be your way of understanding. So what I'm really doing is showing you the way that I tried to understand it. When everything came out, I laid it all out, and these were my processes. They might work for you, and you might go, great, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. You might find other ways, or you might find other words. So I want you to trust yourself that you're going to be really engaging in thinking about what are your ways of working, and what are your ways of working that make you know that you're fabulous and that you're doing a really, really good job, and that you are deepening and expanding and keeping up that beautiful curiosity that it takes to be an early childhood educator. And when people tell us that our work isn't rocket science, I say you're absolutely right. It is not rocket science. It's actually more difficult than rocket science. So we are, we have a lot of thinking to do. We have a lot to juggle, and there is no formula to our work. So that's why it's the most incredible and very special profession on the planet, if I may say so. Okay, so here we go. Here's some more things that are new. Strengthening, updating, replacing, introducing new and/or clarifying principles and practices. See all those words? When they have ing on the end of them, it means present tense continuous. It means it's happening and happening right now, and it's going to keep happening. So that strengthening is something that's going to keep happening, because every single time we engage, we will strengthen, we will update. We might replace a few things. Like, for example, we've replaced cultural competence with cultural responsiveness. And when we read why, we go, oh, that makes so much sense. And it takes the pressure off, because thinking I've got to be competent. How can I be competent in someone else's culture? It's impossible. But I can absolutely learn how to be responsive to diverse cultures. So suddenly we've been given in our beautiful national document this wonderful expansiveness, something to update, to replace, and to strengthen how we engage cross-culturally, because now we're asked to be responsive, and the clarification has been expanded, and it's done in a really beautiful way, and it's really nice to read. It's actually really, really enjoyable to read. So some of the other key updates are strengthening Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives throughout the frameworks, and including the vision, the principles, the practices, and the outcomes. The link between the vision and the planning cycle, we're going to talk explicitly about the planning cycle, because I know that that's a big one for everyone. The principle of ongoing learning and reflective practice, my favourite. It used to be page 13. It's now pages 17 and 18, or 18 and 19. Let me just get that correct for you. It is pages 18 and 19. Can't wait to talk with you about those. The connection between play-based learning and intentionality. So that's changed. I think that one's also made us have a bit of a sigh of relief as well. And expanding guidance and support to the learning outcomes, which we're secretly going to call incomes by the end of the evening. Then there are the introduction of a new principle, which is collaborative leadership and sustainability. And then updating the principle of secure, respectful, and reciprocal relationships to include relational pedagogy, which we'll talk a tiny bit about. Clarifying the meaning of holistic approaches, replacing cultural competence with cultural responsiveness, which I spoke about, and aligning assessment and evaluation for learning, development, and wellbeing. And if you're thinking this is a lot, Red is talking about a lot, if you've got your little booklet in front of you, you will see that all of this information is right here for you. It's all there. So you don't have to remember it all. You can write it down. Sometimes people learn better if they feel like they're writing things down, but it is all there for you, because family daycare is fabulous at streamlining. Okay, so let's go forward. So what's new in the EYLF? Now, this image is a really clear and great way to show you exactly what the specific changes are. So the purple ones are the ones that have been retitled or renamed, the principles and practices. So they're in purple circles. So if it's got a new name, it's in a purple circle. there's cultural responsiveness. You can see that there. And that used to be cultural competence. So there's one example. If you have a look at the green circles, they are the principles that are new inclusions, and there are the 3 of them: Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, sustainability, collaborative leadership and teamwork, and 3 which we're just so thrilled that are there. I think people were doing a lot of that work, and there was a lot of talk about that work, and I know there's been a lot across the profession, but the fact that they're now there explicitly just is really bringing quite a lot of joy to many people. And of course, in the yellowish orange, could we call it buttercup circle, practice that has combined 2 practices together into one. So play-based learning and intentionality. So there used to be play-based learning, and then there used to be intentional teaching. And now we've realised that it was better to communicate those things. It's not that they both didn't work as 2 separate things, but it was better to communicate it to us in our beautiful national, in our approved learning frameworks as something that went together. So within play-based learning, there's intentionality, and you'll get to explore that a little bit further as well. So similarly, what's new in My Time, Our Place? So the ones that have got new names or have been retitled are the principles. They're in purple: partnerships, equity, inclusion and high expectations, critical reflection and ongoing professional learning. Then the practices, you can see the holistic and integrated approaches, cultural responsiveness, which we've talked about, assessment, evaluation for wellbeing, learning and development. So there's a lot that's kind of now been put together with assessment, which I think was such a smart move, because I think we went, oh, here's all the relational stuff, and here's where children feel, and here's who their identities are, and then now let's assess them. What it's asking us to do now is look at that, and I guess that's where the holistic approaches have been described more beautifully and more easily for us, right? Because those things then come together and it makes sense to do it all together. And so the outcomes have been updated so that each outcome begins with children and young people, and that's obviously an age issue being addressed there, and that some of the key components that sit within the outcomes have been retitled or have been given different names. And there you see them in front of you. So they're some of this probably kind of fundamental or the big structural changes that you've seen in the new ALFs. So what to do with what's new? Here's what a CEQA says to us, and there's some really lovely resources available to you, and I took this quote from them directly, that services will consider how, see the how in inverted commas, not only is it bold, but it's also in inverted commas, it's also italicised, beg my grammar there. Consider how to incorporate the updates to the relevant national ALFs version 2 into their programs and practices. This may involve bringing in some new practices into their daily work lives and scaffolding their own and children's learning. So that's telling me there's going to be some new practices coming in. I've got to think about how I'm going to do my own learning, and I've got to think about how I'm going to be doing my teaching and learning with children. That's what that says to me. But the major word in there is how. And I think that's the purpose of this particular webinar this evening, is to say, well, if we're thinking about how we're doing things, then immediately we're already starting to plan. We're already starting our planning cycle. We're already starting to do our critical thinking. So have a look at that bolded language. Once again, different words might jump out at you, but that's the way that I have presented it, because that's what jumped out at me. And I wanted to read everything and think, if I've got to read all of this stuff, but then I've got to make a plan, and then I've got to communicate that plan to other educators or to children or families that I'm collaborating with, how am I going to do it in such a way that it is inclusive language, that everybody knows what's going on, and that it's going to be something that you feel really confident about in the long run. And so the last little note here is, I guess it's looking at the relationship, the really close relationship between teaching and learning. And I don't want us to be afraid of the word pedagogy, which is all the way through both of the learning frameworks. And so that really strong link between teaching and learning, children's teaching and learning, our teaching and learning, what we learn from them, what they learn from us, how we all learn together. I think that particular part of engagement is really connected into when we talk about play-based learning and intentionality. So what to do with the what's new? Now, so we're going to be bringing in some new practices. We're going to be identifying and implementing some new practices, scaffolding your own learning. We've just been through that in the past slide, but I think they're really, really the most important parts. And so how are you going to look at pedagogical practice as an all-in-one thing? Now, there are two incredible scholars that I have known for many years, and I've been leaning and cuddling and nestling into their work for a long, long time. And whilst Atkinson is quoted there as 2020, Auntie Dr. Sue Atkinson has been around for a very, very long time. She's a Yorta Yorta woman. She was Australia's first Aboriginal early childhood teacher and PhD. And Dr. Karen Martin has also done incredible work in early childhood for decades and decades, the two of them, in fact. Dr. Karen Martin is a Nunaka woman, and both of them, in the veracity of their work, in all of the bits and pieces of their work, when you boil it down, what they're asking us to do is think about our ways of working. So when we talk about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives that are now there everywhere, in everything we do, there's this wonderful opportunity to go beyond just this acknowledgement of country, or, you know, have a book in home corner and a something and a something. There's this opportunity to go deeply into, and page 13 of the EYLF and My Time, Our Place do it very well, is they're talking about ancient knowledges, ancestral knowledges, ways of knowing and understanding through shared history and culture. And you can see it there. You can read that up yourself, page 13. Okay, this is an example of page 13 in action. That's asking us to reflect on our ways of working. If we have got two Aboriginal scholars that are asking us to reflect on our ways of working, just by doing that and then thinking about how am I teaching and learning? Have I looked at anything that Auntie Dr. Sue Atkinson has said, or have I looked at anything that Dr. Karen Martin has said? And if I haven't, if I do, I could learn about ways of working that would then help me with Indigenous perspectives, or embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, probably even better embodying them, because you'd be doing things, and that would help you frame up your pedagogical practices, the teaching and learning relationship, the play and intentionality relationship, turning your outcomes into incomes. What are your ways of working? So when you use that little phrase, ways of working, that is actually an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspective. So just thinking about it in those terms helps you with a question that I know many, many people have had. I don't know how to do it. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to get this wrong. How can I begin to do it? How is the operative word? Well, there you are. Auntie Dr. Sue Atkinson and Dr. Karen Martin have both said to us, look at your ways of working. Are your ways of working, could your ways of working actually be more inspired by Indigenous knowledges or ancient knowledges, ways of doing and being, those beautiful words that we find on page 13 of the ALFs. Now, I might just quickly jump to the chat. I have probably got Ethan texting me, and no, I don't. So investment and ratings. I'm just going to quickly jump to the chat. There's 99 plus comments. I'm not sure that I can answer all of them, but I'm just going to have a little quick look to see if there's anybody anything there. I can't see anything of point, but I'm just expecting that Beautiful Family Daycare New South Wales will text me if there are some poignant questions that you would like me to address, so that I can keep pressing on. All right. We're up to the questioning bit. I'm so excited. Okay, so when we turn a statement into a question, it becomes an invitation to notice, note, and name. Now, notice, note, and name is a framework that I've developed over a long time. There's obviously a few other words, like people will add nudge to the end of it or another N word to kind of keep it going. But noticing, noting, and naming are things that kind of really just help us with the planning cycle and our critical reflection. But if we're just working with statements all the time, and I can read one out to you, we kind of get stuck. If we turn a statement into a question, suddenly we get this opportunity to do things differently. So when we notice, note, and name, sorry, let me just go back. When we notice, note, and name, we're actively starting that cycle of planning, which I think is really exciting. So let's have a little look. What are some ways to question? So there's brainstorming. So putting a word on a page and going, does everybody else have another word for this? Or what do you think that means? That is actually a way to begin questioning. Charting is a way. Some people like to work with a bit more structure. The messy thinking doesn't work. I think, oh, which came first and I don't remember and I can't follow that. You don't have to follow it. You don't have to do one way of doing anything. Brainstorming is one. Charting is another. Mapping is another. It might be that you think, well, I'm going to map my classroom and I'm going to start asking some questions about why I've got particular things in particular places, or how did that get there, or why has that been there for 15 years, or did I even know that was there, or I've got this wonderful thing, where am I going to put it? So you might use literal maps or maps of your centre or your community or whatever it is as a way to begin to question, what do I know about this place? So if you're asking, what do I know about this place? You are immediately on page 13. We've already done so much of page 13 in the last 45 minutes. You're immediately looking at place-based sciences if you start to map, because you're looking at where you are and what it's doing. Webbing is another way. Webbing is another way that comes from emergent curriculum. Jones and Nimmo, beautiful, 1989, wonderful piece of work that a lot of our work is based on these days, where you're literally webbing ideas with children like a spider's web, another bit and another bit and another round and another bit and another idea. And this is what My Time, Our Place has to say. Critical reflection is a key practice that involves close examination of all aspects of events, practices, and experiences from diverse perspectives. So you look at things, let me look at my classroom from a range of different perspectives. Where will I get those different perspectives? Page 13. Boom. Love it. Educators can frame their critical reflection within a set of overarching questions. Boom, and you've already created those. Developing more specific questions for particular areas of inquiry. So that's when children say, they might say to you, I had children once say to me, does that cloud, we're on Bidjigal country, if that cloud starts on Bidjigal country and it moves to the left, does it become a Gadigal cloud? Then I have a particular focus of inquiry because they've asked this question. I don't know how to answer that question, but I do know how to go to page 13 and say, we need to research this question from all these different points of view. So that's just a wonderful thing. The other thing is, I think it's really, really important for us to remember that inquiry is our business. And to be great inquirers, we need to be curious and we need to prompt creativity in our thinking and doing. And I'm just going to pop to page 4 because I can't help myself. Page 4, isn't it? If anybody would have like me to recite the EYLF for them, I'm very, very happy to. Page 4 of the EYLF says this. The Australian education, goal 1, these are the 2 goals. The Australian education system promotes excellence and equity. Goal 2, this is our job. This is our job, educators, that all young Australians become confident and creative individuals. Then there's successful lifelong learning and active informed members of community. We love that. But when somebody says, what's your job? What do you do for a living? I actually create confident and creative individuals. What a job. Who wouldn't want that? What an incredible way to describe the work we do. And the way that we get these confident, creative individuals is through this inquiry-based learning. It's through turning everything into a question. Can you tell that I'm a little bit in love with questions? Now, there's a wonderful book that I've played with over many, many years, and it's called How to Be an Explorer of the World. And I think you can get it very inexpensively online. I think I might have even, hopefully ethically, I've got mine $7 or something. But these two questions come through really strongly. How do I create a sense of belonging with children? So if I'm an explorer of the world and I'm creating confident and creative individuals, how do I create a sense of belonging with children? And how do my places and spaces offer a welcome sense of belonging? So if I'm going to be an explorer of the world, I get to think about the place-based sciences. Where am I? Who else and what is here with me, etc., etc. I get to think about the ancestral knowledges. I get to think about ways of doing and being, practice theories, developmental theories. You probably know quite a lot about them. There's so much there, packed in there, that being a curious person will bring out confidence and creativity. And that's what we absolutely love. So I'll be referring to that book as we go along. The other book that I'm referring to is one that the wonderful Anthony Saman and I have put together, which is called the EYLF Playbook. Very beautiful book, because educators deserve beautiful resources. And it's just got a few examples. I'll show you some examples of the way we've used planning for thinking as a way of working, because I think sometimes we go, oh, we've got to plan activities, and then, oh, the children don't stay at the activities, or they make a mess at the activities. What would happen if we started planning for thinking? And what would happen if we were really curious? And what would happen if we were, there it is, and what would happen if we were starting to, I guess, really get involved in the curiosity of children and diving into their questions and finding creative ways to engage with them using page 13, what would that potentially look like? And so these are just a couple of examples that you might find useful. We certainly hope you do. So let's have a look at some of the particular ways of questioning that I discussed before. So this is one way of mapping. Two little examples, and these pages here come from How to Be an Explorer of the World. Just bubbles, little speech bubbles, quoting down little bits and things that children have said. And there's that question again, how do I create a sense of belonging with children? And then you can just sort of map that out. It might be actually mapping your classroom, as I said before. Let's have a look at brainstorming. Let's brainstorm belonging. So just for an example, you can brainstorm anything. You could brainstorm place-based sciences, you could brainstorm pedagogy, you could brainstorm anything. So let's brainstorm belonging. So you can see this line of questioning now that I'm starting to use right the way through as the example. How do I create a sense of belonging with children? Notice the with, not for. So I don't want to create a sense of belonging for them. I want to create a sense of belonging with them. So how would I do that? I could ask them, I could watch them, I could ask them to take photographs, I could draw the space, and then I could throw it all together in a brainstorm that looks something like this. How do I create a sense of belonging with families? Now, a lot of us have really, really great relationships with families, but there are times when sometimes it's a miss, sometimes squiggly things happen, sometimes outside influences make it tricky. You know, there's a whole lot of different things that influence what our relationships with families can potentially look like. So how do we create a sense of belonging with families so that if we have that sense of belonging, those tricky times don't necessarily kind of get stuck, you know what I mean? Then there's always a way, you've got a memory to go back to say, Yeah, remember that time that we talked about la 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 la. You've got this opportunity to be able to advocate and to be able to talk with families. And how do my places and spaces offer and welcome a sense of belonging? So what we've essentially done is we've taken the first concept. So sometimes we're using theories, sometimes we're using principles, sometimes we're using practices. This time we've gone with belonging as the thing to brainstorm. What would happen if you brainstormed belonging with your children and your families, and then you thought about it in terms of your place and space? This also doesn't mean a whole lot of writing. I work with colleagues who are really good at like dot points. I work with colleagues who are really good at doing little squiggles and little quick pictures and things. I tend to be the person who goes blah, 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 blah. Some people are really good at doing like photographs or photo essays. So if I've got somebody taking photos, somebody on a post-it note, somebody with dot points, somebody doing a little bit of a story, that's 5 different people, 5 different ways, and that tells the story really beautifully. Do you get me? Now, that might be children. It might be your families. It might be your ed leader who comes to see you. It might be your coordinator. So there's all of these different people who can contribute to these kinds of brainstorming and understandings. And those things, once you go, how do I create a sense of belonging for children? That will actually then give you ideas about curriculum, because the children will say, well, we go down to the park on that park down that one. We don't go to that one, we go to that one. And then you might go, oh, why'd they go that one? Let's go and explore that. So suddenly you've got this whole opportunity for going out into community to visit that park because children have told you that that's how they've created a sense of belonging. And I think that's the bit where people get stuck sometimes. I don't quite know how to put it all together. So they were just a couple of ideas that I wanted to share with you. So we'll quickly look at charting. Okay, and charting, the fun part is I'm actually going to show you what that looks like in here a little bit later on. The charting part is great because for people who love a list, boom, boom, boom. So look, I talk about Louise, Dorrit and I quite a lot. We literally are chalk and cheese. That we meet in musical theatre. We love singing and dancing. We love our humour. We love all of that. I am the squiggliest, most wildly creative person. Lou is an incredibly creative person too, but she does it in this very kind of structured, measurable way. And so together, I can't say I'm the right way and she can't say she's the right way, but together we're so different. It makes this wonderful conversation about how to do things. I've learned so much about making lists and accountability by listening to her ways of doing things in different kinds of services and different service types. And so charting is one of those. Lists of things, noting what's sustainable or not sustainable, making notes about different materials that can be used, planning for children to help create and label materials. Like that's just the easiest, most funnest thing to do. And it's like, it's not like you're saying to children, right, we're going to do this today. It's saying, wouldn't that be amazing if all the glasses that we kept our pencils in, we would have a name on them. Let's have a go at writing them. How would we find the letters for them? Let's Google it, or let's ask your mum if she could write down the colour red for us and bring it in tomorrow. Maybe we could copy that, or you invent all of these ways of labelling things that then enable children to have these beautiful literacies around the environment. And so I do. On my glass, of course, would be pink. So yeah, I get so excited about those kinds of things because I love when that collaboration happens, and you know that immediately there's going to be this kind of really joyous, collective joyous experience of a success that everybody's had. And then of course, photo essays. You can have a sequence of essays. There's a beautiful photo essay I've got of children birth to 2 taking photos of each other's feet. And I could tell the story, but if you just saw those photographs, they do the work themselves. And I think we've actually got some nice examples of those things coming your way. So then we've got mapping, our thought bubble, and looking at the first principle. So let's look at secure, respectful, reciprocal relationships. A lot in that to think about. Draw a thought bubble for each word, add in the notes that come to your mind, draw a little image. And I am a huge fan of using emojis. So when I first started working with Year 1 when it first came out, people were going, oh, what about this? What about that? I can't think of a word. I said, don't use a word, use an emoji. If you think about who our profession is, I'm 100 years old. I've been here forever. We are working with gorgeous, fabulous people of all ages. Some of our profession, I think Anthony Saman reminded me yesterday, in fact, 43% of the profession has only been with us for 3 or 5 years. Now, I don't know what that looks like, particularly in family daycare, but there are young people out there. They're communicating in different ways to us. I'm an old-fashioned write it on paper thing. Somebody might be a TikToker, although you can still be 50 and a good TikToker, must I say. Somebody might be Instagram, but somebody might be emojis, somebody might be this, somebody might be that. So I think those things aren't necessarily the answer, but they are part of your ways of working. They're part of your process of explaining something. So often people, you put up a comment in a post or something, and there might be a love heart, or there might be a couple of emojis, a smiling one, and that was beautiful because it was about our home, and then there's a house one, and then there might be 2 children holding hands, or thinking about the ways in which you can use imagery to help express things if words aren't always the strongest way. Words will need to be there. Let's face it, that's part of our profession. We don't want to suddenly go, well, do whatever you want, do interpretive dance or whatever, although that's not bad every now and then, musical or two. But it's also remembering that we must work with our strengths to then help us with the things that we know we're not quite as good at. So I might do a little drawing and a little squiggle and then put some words with it. So that way I know, or have a nice photo essay, have a nice strong list of words of all the things that I saw and experienced, and then write the story about it, just so people can see that I am doing that thinking, even though I might not be strong in expressing what I need to express. For me, it is always, I want people to feel great about themselves, because I know that you know your stuff. I know that you know it well. I know that you've done it for a long time. I know that even if you've done it for a short time, you're very enthusiastic about it. I've met some incredibly, very new family daycare people, and they are just extraordinarily involved in what's going on. And so my whole thing is confident, creative individuals. I know that it's our job to create all young people as confident, creative individuals, but I want that for us as well. And the way for us to be confident, creative individuals is to be curious and to be doing this work together and not be afraid. And so the last one we talked about was webbing. And this is fun because I get to use words like blobs and bubbles and circles, and my famous word squiggly. So many people say, oh my gosh, I say squiggly because I've heard you say squiggly. Or squiggly lines to place or connect ideas together. So it can be quite messy. Some people like to think, like this way and all over the place. And again, we've seen order, we've seen structured things, we've seen here's a specific question, let's map that one. Webbing can sometimes be that little loose place where everything goes, or just another thought. Make sure you've got the date on it so it shows your train of thought, how things are connected together. And this is where that stringy sort of part of the cat's cradle comes into play. And so go and visit page 18 of the ALFs. That's where you're going to find some really important questions. And this one is the first one, which I love. And I think there's a whole year of inquiry around this. What is our understanding of each child, their culture and their context? Just by inquiring into that, imagine how much information you get. And then imagine the type of curriculum you get to plan. So they're ways of working that we will be talking a little bit about further on. Now, this is the time where I get to introduce a wonderful family daycarer who I had the privilege of speaking to, and you're going to get to watch this video, and then I cannot wait till you come back, because I'm going to start talking about creativity and curiosity after you've been, hopefully you've been inspired by this the way that I have. So here is Val, and I'm in my Lego dress that day. I was going to wear the same outfit, but I thought, no, I'll shake it up. Val's family daycare interviewed, and we had a great time. If you've got your EYLF or your My Time, Our Place with you, have it with you, because there's a few fun things that we've got to do, a few fun experiences. And there's also a few bits and pieces in your PD in a Pocket booklet that supports the webinar. So let me start this for you. and enjoy it. And I will see you very, very shortly. Hello, everybody. Dr. Red Ruby Scarlet here with you. And to illustrate some of the wonderful things that we've been looking at in using the approved learning frameworks in family daycare, I have the magnificent Val Hume here for an interview. And Val is from her beautifully named Val's Family Daycare. Val, I want to ask you about yourself, but first let's just do an acknowledgement of country. So as I had said at the outset, I'm here on beautiful Gadigal country. So Val, where are you? Tell us, what country are you on today?
I'm in Gyra on Banbai country, and we say Ginagay, which is hello in Banbai. It's Banbai is the clan of the Gumbaynggirr.
Gumbaynggirr?
Gumbaynggirr, that's it.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at.
Beautiful. And Val, how far away from so Gadigal country / Marrickville, how far away are we from each other in this minute?
As in travel time, about 6 hours driving.
We're quite a way away. So give us a bit about Val's Family Daycare. Delight us with your beautiful place.
Oh, wow. I guess the crux of my program is pretty much outside. We spend a lot of time outside. We just love it out there because the children can lead their own learning. There's so many different spaces. They're just so capable out there, and I think they just play and learn so differently in the outdoor environment.
I think also too, the idea of being outside in the past has kind of been thought of as, oh, well, while we're setting up inside, we'll just chuck everybody outside. And what I love about the chats we've had in preparation for this and seeing your beautiful work is that you're kind of actually going, no, I'm centering that as the nucleus of learning, the middle of learning, and a starting place and a rich place and a place you spend a lot of time. And I quite love that we're able to give these different perspectives on those experiences. So
years ago, I remember someone once said, that outdoor program used to be like secondary to the indoor. You'd plan for indoor, and the outdoor was just, we'll just go and ride the bikes. Yeah.
So Val, before we dive into the lusciousness of your beautiful outdoor wonderland, can you just give us a bit, we want to know about you. So obviously your background, but particularly how long you've been working with the approved learning framework. So you're working explicitly with the early years learning framework?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So how long have you been working with that, and a bit about yourself?
Well, I've started family daycare almost 20 years ago. 20 years in July it will be. Wow, have to have a celebration. And so in that time, I started doing my Certificate 3, and then I did my diploma, and then it was just too good. So with some encouragement from my TAFE teacher, I went on and did my bachelor. And so I guess, look, I can't tell you exactly when, but when the first early years learning framework came out, I started to dabble then because I didn't really understand what it was about. And it was just, I guess, over time, then, the more you read it and the more you get encouraged, and then we kind of had to start using it. And then I thought, I better get in and read this and see what it's all about. And it's just so good. It just led me so many different places. I just really enjoyed it and enjoy the whole thing.
Well, as a person who was part of writing the first one, that's very reassuring. But also, Val, something that you said that I hope other family daycare people out there who are listening, or anybody, is that when you said, oh, I'm not really sure about this. And I think that being honest I'm actually not quite sure what to do with it is a strength in essence. Because sometimes you think, oh, we've got to get it right. We've got to know everything. And sometimes that puts pressure on us, and then it might stifle our learning because we feel like we've got to know everything and know how to do it up front. But that's, just that small statement that you said, and that beautiful honesty says, here's something I've got to learn, and I've got, a whole lot of people to get to learn that with. And so I find that really encouraging as well. And, I was teaching at the time when the first EYLF was released. And it was, the photographs were from the centre in which I was teaching. And, we were very lucky to have a bit of a go at it. But even then, being on the inside of developing it, I still had to go, how would I do this in practice? And I love that is actually part of how we build our professional relationships. Do you get me?
Yes, absolutely.
And that's kind of part of our page 13 of different perspectives, our page 18 of engaging in different ways of working and thinking and reflecting and critical reflecting. And it's almost like this conversation is an example of how to do that.
Yes, yeah. Actually, I was just thinking you were talking about page numbers, and I think, oh no, my favourite page number is 22 in the new one because it's the play-based learning.
Hold please, caller. That's line 22 and why it's not page 13. Hang on.
No, page 20. Well, page 21, 22 is my favourite because it outlines everything I like to do.
Play-based learning and intentionality, a new
Yeah.
principle.
Mm-hmm.
And here is the rest of it.
Yeah, because it gives you so many ideas, doesn't it?
Do you know what would be fun? Everybody watching, tell us your favourite page. And if you don't have a favourite page, jump into the table of contents, which we've talked about, and have a look and see if there are some words there that really appeal to you. Wouldn't it be fun if we all did actually have a favourite page?
Yeah. Make that your mission. Get a favourite page.
Favourite page. I love that. So we will dive into that in a sec. So Val, you've got this beautiful photo essay that you've put together. And the question that I've got framing it is, what are some of the ways that you approach putting the EYLF into practice? Yeah. So I'm going to put this on screen for you to delight us with. And can I tell you, having looked through this, it's pretty delicious. So let me get this up and going. There we go. Outdoor learning. Make us wild with envy, Val. Tell us some stories.
Well, I just took these photos because they look like, the children are just doing their thing, but look what's happening, just the immersion in the environment and how they're exploring on their own.
And I mean, as somebody who doesn't know the children and doesn't know the context, but has dived to the EYLF a little bit, and obviously we value our beautiful certificate 3s and diplomas and all the other education that we get to have, which makes our profession so important that we are all qualified, is that I can look at that photo of the baby on the grass and think, oh, I'm so glad Val's out there with the baby on the grass taking that photo. But I can immediately read some things into that about the way that the baby's moving their body, about the interest or the curiosity that the baby or infant is demonstrating. That person probably has a name. The engagement, the intensity, the little bottom is off the ground, leaning right into that blade of grass to be curious about it. And then you can talk about fine motor skills. You can talk about the gross motor, the balance. Like there's so much just to pull out of that. I didn't even see that happen, but your photograph, it's such a great pedagogical photograph because it's really offering some insights into a curiosity that infant is showing in your context.
And he'd get a handful too, and then he'd sit back and he'd just carefully look at what was in his hand, and then he'd just drop it, and then he'd go for some more. It was just really great to watch.
And such a moment of valuing that, I mean, watching grass grow, some people might find very boring like myself, but actually watching grass grow is a fascinating outdoor experience. And even that idea of being, when you say that, holding the grass in your hand and looking at it and being curious about it, sometimes it's easy to think that those everyday things aren't valuable, but they are, because they've struck an interest, they've grabbed that child's attention, and there's an opportunity to be wondering and thinking and then engaging. You get to ask them a question about it. You get to engage in, what page 13 and page 18, my favourites, and probably page 21, 22, now that I think about it, the intentionality of engaging. Val, so you're teaching me as we go. And, those kinds of things, I think, are things that we're busy trying to think, we've got to create this program and have all these things and do all this stuff and have a goal and have an aim, whereas we can actually just observe something like this and find the richness within it.
That's right.
Beautiful. The other one that struck me particularly, I mean, they're all fabulous. I like the reaching and the stacking of those recycled, upcycled, cycle.
Some of our favourite outdoor things. They are chairs, they are wheels, they are towers. They're just the best. We have different sizes, different. Yeah. Yeah,
I
it was
love
good.
stretching up and being on the tippy toes.
Yes, yes,
Mm. And is that your sandpit in the background we see
it
there?
is. It is, yeah.
So interesting, Val. Would it be commonplace, or would it be one option that people might look and go, well, there's not very much stuff in your sandpit. What's going on there?
I don't tend to encourage play in any specific way. Like I'll give shovels and I'll give buckets because, you know, that's great fine motor and physical development as well. But sometimes I think just providing the materials such as, you know, blocks of wood and the spools and pine cones and rocks and shells and pots and pans and just leave them. The other day, this same little guy, the same little guy that's stacking the towers, he called me over and he said, Val, I drew a picture of you. And I'm thinking, what did he use to draw? And I came over, he'd used his stick to draw a picture of me in the sand. And that was just so heartwarming. And I thought, oh, that's so great. And of course, we led on to sort of talk about, you know, the cultural, you know, the way the Indigenous would do the same. And that was, you know, a really open-ended learning experience as well. But just you just never know what's going to happen.
Mm. It's almost like the that would be your logo, isn't it? That looks like a sand drawing.
I guess so, yeah.
And I love the way that you're thinking through what other perspectives could be entailed and twinkled into that moment. What are the many ways of looking at it, that the child's got a stick and drawn a picture in the sand because the opportunity was there. And so it kind of raises some really, really rich questions about planning. So do we have to have 50, 10, 100 things in the sandpit to plan for opportunity? What happens if we plan for surprise? And one of the words that I love the best in the EYLF, and I will get my phone out, not to text my best friend, but to do a little word search, is that the word curiosity is a really important, curiosity and creativity are really important words in learning. And I wonder sometimes if we put out too much stuff, or if we're working around the planning cycle and we're trying to respond to something that we've seen for children and we put all this stuff out, are we prompting curiosity and questions, or are we saying to them, do this? And what I'm sensing is, from looking at your places and spaces, is there's a lot there that says, there's a lot in your environment that says ask a question and be curious and creative. And just to bring it back to the EYLF, on page 4, not in the top 10, but definitely has one of the top 10 quotes. And that is that there are 2 goals in the ALFs, both of them. And the second goal is this, that all young Australians become confident and creative individuals. So when I look at those photographs, I can see the national goal at work in those processes. Talk us through these beautiful, beautiful pedagogical artifacts.
The little guy down on the bottom right with the 2 buckets of water, that was fun. He was just sprinkling sand in over and over and over again, and then reaching in, grabbing the wet sand and then dripping it back out again. And then I've got some smaller spaces like the cubby, and I've got a cozy corner as well, which sort of allows for small group play or individual play. The cubby house that you can see it down the bottom, it's got holes in the back so that if a child does want to go in there by themselves, they can still see and still feel part of everything, but still having that solitary play. And then
sorry, before you go on, Val, what I'm hearing as you're talking is that these little places and spaces have been really thoughtfully planned. So planning isn't all, I mean, it can be, but it's not always, let's put that puzzle on the table. Planning is, I'm going to create this space. It's visible. I'm going to have these 2 ways you can enter so that you can participate by being in there, or you can participate by watching what's going on. So there's a lot of thoughtfulness, intentionality, page 22, Val.
Yes.
Intentionality in literally how you're setting up the physical places and spaces. So we don't have to fill things up with lots of activities and experiences. And so what I'm hearing as you're talking is, I'm just looking at page 23. We might have to get that on our favourites list, Val, which is actually learning environments.
Oh, yes. That's another close favourite. I do like that one as well.
Yeah, it's up there in your top 10. but that also directly relates to the national quality standard, because of course we know that quality area 3 is all about the physical environment. So,
Yes.
just as you're talking, you're telling these beautiful stories that are so inclusive, everyone can understand them. But you can also see how they're strongly connected to the early years learning framework and the practices and the principles that sit really, really neatly and tidily into the national quality standard. So it's almost like they're not just beautiful photographs, they're beautiful photographs that are demonstrating how you're putting the ALFs, the EYLF into practice, and then how that practice sits really beautifully within the national quality standard. So I guess for me, I've been around for a long time too, but I find this really reassuring, because I think, yes, I don't have to fill my classroom up, because of course I'll be inside, Val, not outside with you.
Yeah.
I don't have to fill my classroom with stuff. I can create beautiful places and spaces that offer opportunities, that ask questions, that are open-ended. And it's like, I know the theory is called loose parts, and people use the term, I like to use the term intelligent materials.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because, and I mean, it comes out of, some of the thinking that some people have done in other approaches around the world. Reggio Emilia is one of them. But the way that idea of materials being intelligent, then we can be in conversation with them. And those gorgeous children rolling on that thingy there, that's a different way to participate with something that would normally say, well, crawl through me, or stand next to me, or whatever. So I love the way that the children's curiosity, or what you're noticing as well, is actually driving the way that they're using those materials, and there's that exchange between them. That what do you call it? Is it like a tunnel?
It's a tunnel, yeah.
And look how it's making those child use their bodies.
Absolutely. And they slid down the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of shaping the way that the children are moving. So that relationship between the materials in the environment, the physical environment, and the fact that you're noticing that, I mean, that's kind of a little journey around the planning cycle, isn't it?
And what else have we got? This little guy in the tire, he got in and out, in and out, in and out. And then one of the other children came over with the hoop, and obviously seeing that he was enjoying being inside the tire, then decided to put the hoop over the top. So that was a really interesting one, because I think he was just trying to find out his place in space, and he was just in and out, in and out. And then we've got the tree swing, that's a favourite, and the cupcake.
Can I just make a little comment about the tire and the hoop? What I love about that is, in your story, it's like there's these 3 layers of noticing. So there's the child experimenting with their body in space. Then there's another child noticing that child doing that. And then you noticing that child doing that. And so that, that level of detail, you don't have to have lots of things, and it doesn't have to be busy, just that slowing down and the watching of the watching of the watching. And I suppose that's a conversation that you could probably come back to. Remember that day that you were in the tire and I saw so-and-so, and they then brought the hoop over, and then I was watching da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's an example of how, you can take an observation, and then you can start to plan for how you might, take that experience somewhere else, because revisiting is a form of planning in essence, isn't it? If we go back to the cycle of planning, the cycle of planning isn't about giving a question to answer. It's about being curious. And it's, we talk about in our book and in our courses is that the language that's used is ing, observing, their verbs, their doing words. So how are we planning, and who are we planning with? And are we planning with the clay, and is the clay planning with us? So there's all those beautiful dimensions that I think, and I actually find it very freeing thinking about it in this way, because I remember, as a young, when I first finished my associate diploma moons ago, that thinking I've got to put an activity on the table, and then what, and how's that going to meet that individual child's needs, rather than going, well, what is that child doing, and how can I work individually with that child within this group? And that's what I'm hearing when I'm listening to you tell these stories about the way you work really closely with materials and physical spaces and places for children to question, inquire, investigate, explore, and all of those words are in the EYLF multiple times. And I also find that reassuring, because I think sometimes we think, oh, we've got to predict what children will do so that we can observe that they've got their fine motor and they can start writing their name or whatever, or they can do pincer grasp, or we feel under pressure to set things up to, which is more like a test, isn't it? And that's not really how the EYLF wants us to work. It wants us to put opportunities out so that we can learn with and alongside children in the surprises that they'll offer us.
Absolutely. So these are just some things I put together. I like to make things out of recycling, just to show the children that you don't have to go out and buy a toy.
And I guess with our new sustainability principle on page 17, it's such an important one, because it deals with, 3 parts of environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. And it's like, just in your brief description of these beautiful places and spaces that's so inviting, it's like you've addressed those 3 parts of that sustainability, as a starting place. Because how do we do economic sustainability with children? It could sound a bit outrageous, but it is that thing around, look at these boxes and we're reusing this and it's done that, and it might have another life after this and another life and another life. Yeah, because I think sometimes we think our sustainability is, let's stick lids to a piece of cardboard and that becomes an activity. And whilst that might be fun, it then can't be reused for anything else.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Val, just at this point, I want to reflect on a couple of the questions around, we're talking generally around practice and linking back here and there to our ALFs. What are some ways that you would make this visible, the ALFs visible in your every day, in your approaches, in your communications with families? What are some of the bits and pieces that you do to make it visible? I can see that it's visible, and I'm sure our beautiful viewers can see that it's visible within the places and spaces that you've set up, the thoughtfulness, the cycle of planning, thinking about children, following children, responding to children, looking at how children are working together. And we know that all of that is in the ALFs. How do you make that visible?
To everyone, pretty much. To the children, even to the children themselves, we talk about it.
Yeah.
We say things like, oh, you're using your body and, you're using your brain to think, and even things like, when you're feeling angry, your red brain's there and you can't think because your thinking brain's going to hide because your red brain's there. And we talk about things like that. So I guess talking with the children about their learning, I guess, is one way to make it visible. I talk to the families a lot. So, quite often, like, they're welcome to stay. We're outside in the afternoon when it's pickup time. They're welcome to stay and watch their children. And I'll just say, can you see what's happening over there? That's learning outcome 3, and they're looking after their bodies, and just something along those lines. I do have quite a few teachers as parents, so that it's quite a good topic of conversation between us all too. And then what else do I do? I guess a lot of it is on project books and emails and observations. That's basically, and then you'll put things around, and, if there's a picture, you'll just explain what the picture's about and to say, they're showing they're a confident learner, things like that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you've got a range of different ways that you're communicating things. Sometimes you'll write that down. Sometimes it'll be in an email to somebody or to a group of people. Sometimes you'll talk about and be illustrating it in that moment. Sometimes you're putting it in your program book and you're reflecting on it, because I know you have a few different bits and pieces that you will be showing us. Yeah, and I think I love that, because it's such a reminder. I know I can get a bit stuck in my head thinking, oh, I've got to write that down. And did I say to that educator, did you write that down? And have I got a photo and da-da-da? And whilst the evidence that you're showing us here is absolutely gorgeous, sometimes it is the conversation that you've had is just as valuable. And it's how wonderful for a family or a parent to hear that's outcome 3. It might sound a bit weird in some sense, but in the other sense, how wonderful that they can go, Oh, I'm so reassured. Val knows exactly what she's talking about. And she's illustrating to me that something that I might not see, because we know that play is so important to us, families might not see. You've got that really beautiful advocacy piece for the professional ways in which we're engaging and just really gently throwing it into a conversation with a family. So it's not like we've got to, I worry that people get very overburdened with, oh, it's got to be the outcome. We've got to put this, we've got to quote the outcome and quote the EYLF and, all of that stuff when it may not necessarily need to be that rigid or that intense. It can be that very gentle, or I'm not sure about that. Let me just have a little look and I'm going to see, because I know I read something about relationships in here or communication. Here it is. It's in outcome 4 and 5. That thing where the EYLF is here to be our friend and to help us, help resource us to be able to have those conversations, not a test of do we know it and are we using it and we're quoting all the bits, because I worry that we put ourselves under quite a lot of pressure doing that kind of stuff.
I mean, the beauty of the EYLF is that it's so flexible. I mean, there's no right or wrong way. It's just whatever you can get from it, and every learning instance is unique. And so every learning instance isn't always going to fit into a certain category. It might be 2 or 3 different learning outcomes, and there's just no right or wrong, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my little story about the outcomes, which we've talked about, is that I think about them as incomes. So if they're an outcome, we might feel like we've got to attach it to a piece of children's learning. I like to think about them as incomes and talk to my colleagues about them as incomes, because then if I think about, a child having a strong sense of identity, what's all the incoming information that is indicating that child has a strong sense of identity, rather than they've put their bag in their locker, therefore they must have a strong sense of identity. I can't know that. But I can, as you have so beautifully demonstrated, when children are doing something and they're curious about it, if I think about that as incoming information, I can then go, that child has curiosity, so they must be a confident and involved learner. I can dance with what I'm seeing there in outcome 4. And that's where that incoming information, if I turn the outcomes into incomes, that's when I'll go, that's where that will find its little, place of belonging.
I really like that. That's good.
I have an Irish heritage, so at risk of stereotyping myself and every other Irish person, sometimes flipping things around the other way, going backwards, creates this opening for learning in a different kind of way.
Absolutely, yeah.
More deliciousness. Val, is that outside, inside?
No, yeah, that is outside, inside.
I just can't get away from the outdoors.
I know, I'm sorry. Not sorry.
Divine, it's divine. I'm very inspired.
These are my little literacy setups. I always try and add a book to the little areas. The one on the left, we had such an interest in construction and demolition and roadwork, and so that was never ending, that one. And then and I think if you've got a book with them, it just sort of, they can look at it and then relate back and then retell the story in their own way, and I kind of like that idea.
I love the way that the first words out of your mouth to describe these images was how I do literacy.
Yes.
I can imagine that people might have gone, is this how Val sets things up? Or is this how this or that? And your description of them was, these are literacy spaces. And I adore that, because, again, your favourite pages, 21 and 22, play and intentionality, is that the intentionality is that by ensconcing yourself and being in something and experiencing it, and then that is a form of literacy, because you're doing all the pre-literacy work in that moment and embodying it. And then you've also then got the testament through the story that's there. And that's saying, this could be one of the storylines that you're playing with in amongst this. And we can read the story, but we can also experience the story. We can tell the story. We can become the story and play the story out with our dramatic arts.
And add our new versions of the story. That's always the best.
Innovate on the text. Yeah, amazing. I love that. I also love the way that there's such authenticity in the collections of things. So you've got some recycled materials or upcycled or cycled or refreshed, renewed. You've got bits and pieces from outside. You've got bits that you probably have collected or bought here and there. It's a really lovely, eclectic collection of things, and homemade, becoming on the way out. Like those ferns will probably return to dust. Let's jump to these. Talk us through a few of these. We're on the home stretch, but I'd love people to hear about these beautiful little captions, pedagogical captions, or captures of practice, or moments of thinking and deliciousness.
Why I did this, because, you say to the families when, they had fun in the mud, but I wanted them to see what the children had learnt in the mud. And so I guess that's why down the bottom I just wrote, this is what they were learning, and this is how it, and there were so many different learning outcomes, but you don't want to be too busy with them all. So I just chose the 2.4.1. I think that was on the old version, because that's back last year, that one. But and so that's the best way I felt that I could explain what the learning was happening there.
Short and sweet. So I think that, also too, there's so much in this, and I love that whenever the interest ends, or forever. There's, you've got a few salient points there, and just enough, a little nod to what's going on, and this beautiful communication that, again, I think it's very inclusive, because that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, families, sometimes they'll read things, sometimes they won't, but there's enough there to prompt your memory. There's enough there to communicate with families. There's enough there to substantiate, yep, I'm engaging with the ALFs, and I know how it sits with the National Quality Standard, and this is how I'm presenting it in a small, achievable way, so we don't have to overload ourselves.
Oh, this was one of my most favourite projects ever. And it all started with a couple of little guys, and they had torches, because we love torches. Everyone loves torches, and the torches are just out for them. And they had put the torches into the Play-Doh, and they couldn't understand why they couldn't see the light through the Play-Doh. And then it went on, and then we just talked about, making some shadow puppets, and then we made some shadow puppets, and then we did our faces. And then I got to thinking, gosh, this is, the play with light. And then I thought, I wonder, can I get a projector? And then so my extension was that we got an overhead projector, and then that learning just went on for months and months and months, and it changed and evolved over time. And so that was so much fun.
And there's another piece here, and as I'm looking, I'm seeing quality areas, I'm seeing EYLF, I'm seeing photographs, I'm seing stories. So it's just
I try, and when I write, what the learning, like if you can go back one, I try and just sort of what I write, I try and link, like I write the outcome, but I try and write what that outcome means, so that it means something. It's in context, if that makes sense.
So it's like the example, it's a well thought out, what is that? And obviously you don't have that stored in your head. You'll go, well, hang on a minute.
Absolutely. And quite often you'll think, that might be in, learning outcome 4.2. And then you go, hang on, but that's more like 4.4, because you think you know where it is. And then you look and go, actually, no, it's not. But that's okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't, the lesson we're learning from you is, or the message is, that it is using the framework, is constantly using it, not having to memorize it and not having to get it right, because it might be this or it might be that, or it could be two things at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
And so now we've got a little video. Do you want to introduce it, Val?
Well, basically this is, and I'm not saying this is how everybody should do it. I'm just saying this was what works for me. I like boxes. I like order. I have tried so many different ways of programming. And in the end, I just designed my own because it worked. And so this is basically how I keep track of everything, and it works for me. And so, it's just have a play and see what.
Let's hit play. This is Val's premiere pedagogical documentation movie, and you are here to witness it.
Okay, besides my project book and observations, this is how I record the children's learning as well. This is my diary. That's just where I record day-to-day things children have said, what observations I'm taking, what I need to do, what children I have. Then every afternoon I do up of what we did today. And this goes to all of my families each afternoon, which helps to keep them updated on what they're doing, and it keeps me reflecting on what learning's going on. Then I plan for follow-up from past observations and evaluate them. These are plans for intentional learning, things that I want to introduce and what I think we can work on, such as focus areas, their evaluations. That's the school children's learning interests and follow-up. And then at the end of the week, I do a big reflection.
So the other thing I love, Val, I'm just going to get our faces back. The other thing that I love, there's so many things that I just love when you're talking and what I'm hearing, because I'm, interpreting it through that EYLF framework, is that, when you look at your places and spaces, it looks like it's all out there and woo-woo. And then you say, actually, I love boxes, I love order, and I've tried this, and this, and this actually helps me do that. And I adore that you're going, we say, chuck out the boxes and chuck out the templates. And in some cases, it is good to do that if they're constraining. They're actually helping you think through things, which we saw. And then you're creating all this open-ended stuff where it's investigating and exploring and discovery and investigation and all those beautiful, curious terms. So it's like that thing where there is no truth about you have to have this or you have to have that, or you should have this or you shouldn't have that. The thinking is the most important part to be able to then plan for thinking and then thinking through planning. And I think you've just illustrated that so beautifully. I am totally inspired by many things you've said. I feel very reassured. I'm a very experienced teacher and I love my job. I think I'm pretty good at it, but I also love these kinds of conversations. This is collaborative leadership between two educators. We've done a lot of critical reflection that we've demonstrated for our gorgeous colleagues out there. We've danced with different pages. We've wrestled with where's that one and what about this and what could we put here and how could we do that? And so hopefully you're as inspired by Val as I am. Val, I think you're just going to be getting a few emails and phone calls and text messages about how well, you'll definitely be getting some from me.
Of course.
But yeah, any kind of final thoughts you want to share with your colleagues?
Look, like I said before, it's just go with it, follow your nose, get stuck into it, just read little snippets, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and just know that you never know everything, and just keep learning, thinking about thinking and acting. That's all I can say.
Sage advice. So Val, we can't thank you enough. And yeah, I will actually, you're going to inspire me. I am going to go outside after.
Yay! You take off your shoes. Walk on the grass.
Take off my high heels. See what a good teacher you are, Val. You've actually got me outdoors. So I will do that. Actually, I will challenge myself. Thank you so much for all of the preparation, all of the thinking, all of the inspiration, and lucky children, lucky us to have you in our beautiful collaboration. And we'll look forward to hearing more from you sometime.
Thanks, Red. Thanks, everyone.
I think we're back. So, curious, creative ways of working. I don't know what you thought of Val, but I was pretty impressed. And I did go outside. I took off my stilettos and went outside and got my feet in the sand at the beach, which was absolutely gorgeous. Now, I'm just going to very quickly move through some ways that things could look in practice, remembering that everything I'm showing you is in your booklet, beautifully presented, so that you can either watch the webinar again if you want to hear the talking about it, or you can have a look through the information I'm about to deliver to you in your beautiful booklet. So here are some ways that things look in practice. So this is an example of how language is referenced, and somebody's looked at an assessment for learning in your curriculum or your program. And here you can see that what the educator has done is used learning outcome 1, that children have a long sense of identity. We certainly hope so, a strong sense of identity. And the left-hand column box is what the educator has observed the child doing. So that's a kind of really beginning way to go, here, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what the child is doing. And so it helps to gather the language to help you describe what's going on. And you can see in the right-hand side, the column is kind of, what the educator can do. For example, strategies that you can use to help support achieve what's going on. So it's kind of a nice way to actually use the document, engage with the document, to be able to say, well, it's not just something to look at and read, because who's going to go home and read it? That's why you need fun ways to engage with it. So this is one example. Here's another one. Now, this is one of my favorite things. So you think to myself, well, I want to know more about creativity, because I've got to I've got to make creative, confident children. So I get my EYLF on my phone or my tablet or the hard copy, probably not hard copy, or thing, and I just go into the search and I type in creative, and creative comes up 19 times. And so I get, not only do I see that the word comes up 19 times when I search like that, it then gives me the context in which creative is there. Confident creative individuals and successful lifelong learners, creative aspects of learning, use creative forms of expression to explore, cognitive, linguistic, creative and spiritual, they're big words to get your chops around, the activity of including dance and creative movement through the creative arts, the creative thinking and inquiry processes, blah, blah, blah. Engaging creative experiences such as art, dance, blah, 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 most important of all, a range of creative media, including photography. So what it does is it actually gives you, when you search for a word, it actually gives you all these prompts for ways in which you can then use it, which I think is terrific. Using digital technologies and media for creative engagement. Blah, 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 blah. So that's just one example. You could type in community. You could type in maths. You could type in numeracy or literacy or any of those things. So that's the word search is a kind of a really fun way. I love doing that, in fact. And I did look up cat and dog, and I can tell you that cat is in there 696 times and dog doesn't come in there at all. So I'm very sad for the dog people. But obviously, cats are all about curiosity and creativity. So the word search is fun. Now, another thing to do is choose your own adventure. So I've gone into staff meetings with people, open her up, give her a flip. Right, what's caught your eye? That has. I've landed on learning environments. Let me talk about that. So where did I stop? I had a look here. What caught my eye? Learning environments is next to cultural responsiveness. So how am I doing learning environments and cultural responsiveness together? Let me note that down, because that might make a really interesting question about, like, where am I, and place-based sciences that are on page 13, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think about my way of working to start to string the pieces together. So this is the bit where you go, well, that bit's cultural responsiveness and that bit's learning environments and that bit's da-da-da. We don't want you to work like that. That's not how the National Quality Framework the whole thing was actually designed. It was designed so that all of these things would work beautifully intertwinkled together. And this is what I guess we're trying to help you in this way of engaging with the ALFs. So think about your way of working. Now, here's another little set of visuals that I've created for you. And I love this kind of stuff. Words to me, I love words. I love when children make up words. I love fantastical words. I love all those imaginary things. And this is a book called Creating Memory Palaces. And I'm working with a few organisations where we're using this idea of memory palaces as something to kind of literally language something into existence, if you like. It's almost like, I don't want to get too weird, but like, you know, casting a spell or we're manifesting something, or if I say it enough, then I'll believe it and I'll know it and I'll think it. So things like this, and I love this, openings that frame, these are the names of the chapters, light that plays, shapes that remind, images that motivate. So think about inclusion there. Think about the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, openings that frame, shapes that remind us that there are different ways in which cultures express something, images that motivate us to ask a question because we think, well, we don't express ourselves that way, or that's a really different way of expressing womanhood, or a mother and a child, or a family, or a grandparent, or a something. So there's a whole range of ways in which language like that can work. I love that, water that pools and connects. When we think about what water does, you know, is it water play, or does it pool, and does it connect, and does it move, and does it soak, and does it annoy us, and does it stretch things, and does it shrink things? You know, there's this wonderful opportunity to start thinking about all the beautiful science that can get caught up in the language of how we describe things, and then we make those things come true within curriculum. So putting it all together is this wonderful game of cat's cradle. We're starting to string it all together, threading it all together, learning environments that are warm and welcoming and culturally responsive. See what I did just there? That was the page that I landed on. There's an example. So keep your curiosity and your creativity alive so that you are constantly reflecting on your own practices, because curiosity equals creativity. If you've got creativity, you will try everything. You've got your planning cycle sorted, notice, note and name, and then you are creating creative, confident learners in ourselves and in children. Now, here's another couple of things about questioning the elements of the framework. And this is, once again, remember how I talked about brainstorming and mapping and webbing and those things? The framework has actually given us a whole lot of different ways to organise the same pieces of information. And I loved finding this out as part of my analysis. And it's written here for you, but now I've also got the images. So have a look at this and ask yourself these questions. Are you a list learner? Because if you learn in lists, you go to the table of contents. It literally gives you the bird's eye view of what is in the ALFs. Then you can turn your visions into verbs. Are you a bit more of a cat's cradle learner? Do you like things to be more sort of squiggled together? And you can see in that shape, exactly the same information that's in the table of contents is in the elements of the early years learning framework in this particular image. And then on this side, you can see how exactly the same information is stacked up. So the EYLF and My Time Our Place, both of the approved learning frameworks actually already give you 3 different ways to engage with them. So in essence, when they're saying there are lots of different perspectives, the documents are already talking to you in a whole lot of different ways using this different imagery. The great thing is that goes consistently through is the color coding. And I think that's a really wonderful way to go. You know, even if I'm looking at the image which I'd call the cat's cradle on this side of the screen, the green is the learning outcomes. Well, then, yeah, the green's the learning outcomes in the way it's stacked up as well. So there's no inconsistency in the delivery of the information. It's just the way that it's formed. And I love the way that there are those 3 different ways, and exactly the same way in My Time, Our Place, that those things are organised. So the colours are consistent and they help us follow those trajectories as we go along. But the shapes of thinking, the ways of working, if you like, are given to us in a range of different ways. And I think that that's a really responsible and respectful practice on behalf of of the way that we get to encounter and engage with the approved learning frameworks. So ask yourself this and discuss this with your colleagues. These are just a few. Do you think in lists? Do you think in lines? Do you think in squiggles? Do you think in thought bubbles, pictures, different ways for different reasons, emojis? I think I saw a few emojis pop up in the chat, which I really adored. And value the way that you think. What I really want is, again, creative, confident educators, because that's how we make creative, confident learners of children and ourselves. But really value the knowledges that you have so that the other bits that you know you need to do, you've got all of this other strong knowledge to base it on. And there will be something in the documents to be able to support you to do that. That's what's so fabulous about them. So then we turn the frameworks into questions. How do we do blah, 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 blah? How might we do da, 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 da? What if I did da, 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 da? When could we do da, 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 da? And then you can make up a few of your own. So these are just a couple of little lead-ins to prompt you. And once again, they're all in the book there for you. So let's see them in action. So the principle of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, the most important. We're on country. We're always on country. Even, I'm on the second floor of my unit, but I'm still on country. So this is what it reads. It says, providing opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people to see themselves, their identities and cultures reflected in their environments is important for growing a strong identity. Da, 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 da. So then you can read that and think, well, where do I begin? How do I do that? What does that actually mean? So that's when you add to the beginning. How am I providing opportunities? Da, 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 da. And then you can say, well, we've got these Bronwyn Bancroft stories. We've watched Arnie Tracy Bostock, Lynn Bostock's Acknowledgement of Country. We've looked at Arnie Dr Sue Atkinson's Possum Skin Pedagogy. We've got some resources that we've learned through our local lands council, which is probably the most important starting place, your local community. We've chatted with other educators around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives. When we've had families, we've said, is it okay if we chat with you about resourcing with us and connecting us with community? Because you can't just assume that. So if you say how, you will be able to have this wonderful then web or brainstorm or list or stack or cat's cradle of ways in which that you've actually started that work. So my worry is that if we see a statement, we think, oh, I've got to do that. I've got to tick it off and I've got to show the evidence of that. You don't. You've got to show the evidence of how you're doing something. You're in a process. That's why we've got self-study. That's why we've got self-assessment. That's why we've got quality improvement, because we're constantly in motion. So if we turn every sentence into a question, we then more easily can say, yeah, I'm doing all this stuff that you might not have recognised otherwise. Same with collaborative leadership. You can see there the example. First sentence, all educators exercise aspects of leadership in their daily work with children, young people, da, 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 da. Turn it into a question. How am I, as an educator, exercising aspects of leadership in my daily work with children? Am I collaborating with them? Am I listening to them? Am I watching them lead? Am I learning from them? So you immediately open up your universe for you to be able to go, I'm doing all this stuff. I don't have to have a finished product of here's what I did to, show leadership with educators and children and da 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 da. I just went, how am I doing that? Yeah, I'm engaging in quite a lot of things at the same time. And then you've got these beautiful lines of inquiry that you begin to follow. But the biggest question of them all, of course, is the planning cycle. And I think the most questions come to me about how do I do this? Where do I start? What does it look like? So this is one way. And once again, it's all there for you. In the description, the great thing about the new EYLF is that they've turned the words from observation into observe. So it all becomes a doing word. So that's why there's a lot of doing going on. And how is doing. So lots of howing and lots of doing. And also too, they've added in those little icons, which is where we sort of got the idea of using emojis. If you observe a child doing something, if I watch a child doing something, I might just very quickly in my head think of a few little quick words and a few little quick images, and then I could tell the story later. So how am I doing that? I'm doing it by collecting something at that particular time. what are the approaches to analysing? Am I sitting with children saying, do you remember what you were thinking there that day? Do you remember who else was there with you? Because I can see someone in the photograph, but I've only got their leg there. I can't see all of them there. Finding what are the ways in which you're starting to engage with the sources of things that you found. Once again, planning and design, which we love. In what ways am I choosing appropriate learning and teaching strategies? So do I go, sometimes I'm going to sit back and watch the children because I really want to see who leads play. Other times I think, I wonder whether there's some, very enthusiastic children, but they might dominate the play a little bit. And I see this child over here who can't quite get in. Maybe I'm just going to go in and scaffold a little bit this time and just see if I can, help children work collaboratively and work a little bit differently. And then I might, again, choose another strategy to stand back and then watch what happens to see if that strategy was successful. So if you're asking yourself, what should I give a go? When will I be involved? When will I lead something for children? When will I stand back and watch? Obviously, when you're standing back and watching, you're engaged in watching. It's not, looking around at the sky and your phone and all that sort of jazz. It's watching what's going on, but you're giving children a little bit of breathing space to just build relationships, etc. So in what ways am I choosing? Trust yourself that you're good at doing that. Again, how can I turn plans into action? So what did I see there? What am I going to plan from that? I did notice this, so therefore that becomes my plan. How am I ensuring children's cultural and linguistic and diverse capabilities are being considered? So then you might think to yourself, well, I'm going to have a look at my environment and go, I notice these children get access to that. These children play a lot with that, but they don't seem to crisscross. I wonder if I could actually choose a strategy and turn a plan into action and then actually see if I can entice those children into other spaces by using resources that they love or knowing that they like spending time with me more in this space than that space. So you turn it into a question. And then how do I document that? Well, words, your emojis, your lists, your squiggles, your beautiful photo essays, the little stories that you tell along the way, asking children, do you remember what happened? I'd love to know, when you looked at that, what was the first word that jumped into your head? Using children's beautiful creativity, prompting them to be thinking about how they would describe their learning environments and their learning experiences. All of that is part of how the planning cycle works. And then you go back to them and say, hey, remember that day that you said that the sandpit looked like it was a glistening field of stars? Well, I was thinking about that. And I wondered if you wanted to, turn the sandpit into an atmosphere or a something. So you go down that beautiful imaginative pathway with the children based on something that you've noticed. So then you're back to observing. So you're using that and you're literally going around the cycle, but you're doing it with questions and you're making sure that you're collaborating with children all the way along. That way you get a couple of things. First of all, amazing ideas because children are so incredible. But you also then, because you're working with them and asking them what they think and pointing out to them what they notice, what you noticed about them, you're then, the authenticity of what you're seeing isn't just you going, oh, I'm observing this child has a fine motor skill. You're actually engaging in this world making and the storytelling that's going on with children. And because they're involved with that, then you've got a very strong evidence base because children are then part of your beautiful question of all, which is your planning cycle. So I would love to hear how you work with that. So here again is another way that you can turn indicators into questions to support yourself. Once again, using the language. So this is the other thing. Sometimes we struggle with, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to say. We have this incredible document plus the My Time, Our Place. It is full of language to help us describe our work. Here's a really good example of using the information in the indicators underneath the outcome to help you go, how did I see children create opportunities for open and authentic partnerships with families and communities? How did I see that happening with an Aboriginal perspective? I did see children wanting to put sticks in the sandpit, and I thought, oh, that might not be safe, but maybe they've seen that sometimes a digging stick, or that sometimes that's a way that some Aboriginal people in some Aboriginal communities might tell a story. So that's how you then get to use that particular information that's already there for you to turn it into a question. And then, of course, my very favourite, turning the outcomes into incomes. Let's just do one of them. So outcome one, children have a strong sense of identity. Well, what are the ways that children have a strong sense of identity? How do we see it? How do we know it? How do children show us or tell us the ways in which they feel connected to their world? How do children express their sense of well-being? How do children demonstrate their confidence as learners? And how can I capture them engaging in their learning? So the minute you turn your outcome into incomes, and you heard me discuss this with Val, is it then opens up to say, how am I doing this? And you will amazingly come up with these incredible lists and mappings and word banks and cat's cradles of things that are coming out of, rather than, oh, the child has a strong sense of identity because they know where their locker is. You know that it's deeper than that. You think, I've just got to write this down because I've got to make sure that I've got to get measured against it, so I've got to have evidence. But here is this most beautiful way for you to do that, just by turning the outcomes into incomes. And I know everyone who I've introduced this to has gone, it's absolutely turned their world around. So I can't wait to hear your stories of how that's happened for you. Then, of course, you can do things like start to put the incomes together. How do children communicate their strong sense of identity? So that's income 1 and income 5. So I guess my message for how do we engage with the approved learning frameworks? Well, when we turn statements into questions, we open up possibilities for understanding and ways of working. Remember Auntie Dr. Sue Atkinson and Dr. Karen Martin that we might otherwise struggle with. So let me tell you the answer. And there's a plane going over because I live in America. The answer is question everything. So here is some resources. Again, we've got those for you. You can click on those links, or you can look them up in the back of your booklet. And of course, my contact information is there if you would like to get in touch with me. And I also have started an EYLF Facebook group. So we would love to see you all in there, hearing about all your incomes and all of your wonderful questionings. So questions, I don't know if we have any. I realise we've twinkled a teensy weensy bit out of 1 hour into another. And otherwise, if you want to find out more, here is the information. Thank you so much to Family Daycare and to the New South Wales Government, the New South Wales Early Childhood Education and Care Regulatory Authority for funding this professional development. I've had such a joyful time preparing it for you and delivering it to you. I'm so impassioned about seeing this work well and people feeling fabulous about themselves. And I really look forward to hearing more about your stories. It looks like we might end our session here. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful evening, and I hope it has been useful, and I look forward to hearing from you all. Good night.
Thanks for participating in this episode of PD in Your Pocket. This series was produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal peoples. If you'd like to watch or listen to other episodes in this series, or find out more information about this program, you can find us at our website at nswfdc.org.au/PD in Your Pocket.